Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chairperson Spotlight Series. I am here with our guest today, a former chairperson. My name is Pamela Zellner. I am the program manager for the Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I will be asking our guest a few questions today. First, I want to ask our guests to introduce themselves and to let us know which years you were the chairperson of the commission. Hello, everyone. Wow, it is so good to see you again. It's been a long time. The blink of an eye, and 30 years it's been since the commission had been set up. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Bruce Bucci. I am deaf from three-generation deaf family here in Rhode Island. Some of the interesting things about my family is that my grandparents, my parents, mostly my entire family, all went to the Rhode Island School for the Deaf. In the beginning, it was an oral school that changed over to sign, and that's part of my journey. July 13th, 1992 is when I became a commissioner. The following month, August 13th, 1992, the commission met and voted and elected me as its chair. Can you tell us what inspired you to want to be chairperson? What inspired me to become chairperson is really, of course, first because I'm a deaf person. I had experienced many frustrations in my life. For example, the frustration of getting interpreting services in Rhode Island. It's very hard to find an interpreter in Rhode Island. If you went to a place for an appointment or you went to college to take a class, to get an interpreter was very difficult. I would look and look and look. And there was one situation that I was a part of. I had a specific interpreter that I had asked to come interpret my college class for me. And the college said no, that they couldn't be the interpreter, that they would decide who would be the interpreter in my classroom. I was kind of shocked, but they put that interpreter into my class. And I realized how bad things were. I felt stuck because I used ASL, and the interpreter looked at me and was like, "Could you please say that again?" And I said it again in class with all the students looking at us. And the interpreter said, "Can you sign it again?" And so I changed sign modalities. And that was just an experience that I did not want to continue. So that was when I realized that I should go check out the Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Back then, it was the Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hearing Impaired, RICDHH. So I went and I wanted to bring up my concerns about interpreting services here in Rhode Island. And I went and I was shocked. There were so many commissioners sitting in the room, and almost 95% of them were hearing. They were great people. Sure, they had a good heart, and they wanted to serve the deaf community. But they had no idea what the goal of that service was. And a lot of the deaf community didn't even know that they could go to the commission and empower themselves and speak up about the things they wanted. And so the commissioners would just meet and make decisions that did not make lives better for the deaf and hard of hearing people. It didn't. It maybe made things better for the hearing people. So I thought, oh, wow, I'm really stuck here. So I decided that we needed to set up a committee. We needed to change the system. And so we got together and discussed about putting deaf people into the group, changing the way things were done. There were some commissioners who refused to step down because they felt the privilege of being a commissioner. They would go to an event or a social gathering and people would say, what would you do? Well, I work here and there, and I'm also a commissioner for the deaf and hearing impaired. And people would be impressed. Oh, you're a governor appointee. Wow, that's important. But in actuality, that person was doing nothing to help the lives of hearing people, deaf and hard of hearing people in Rhode Island. They just wanted to stay. So the committee, or shall we say task force that got together, we submitted a bill. And in the bill, we asked for the Rhode Island Commission to be called the Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and to have the number of commissioners reduced to, I believe it was 11, somewhere between 7 and 11. That there must be 60% deaf or hard of hearing people and only 40% hearing people. We submitted that bill. It passed. It was voted on, sent to the governor, and he signed it. And the old commission with hearing impaired at the end was dissolved. Some of those members did join the new commission on deaf and hard of hearing. And there was a new vision at that time. And so that's why I felt it was really important for me to be involved in the commission. You know, it would have been set up and we needed the community to be involved. For Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, you have to be involved. Rhode Island School for the Deaf has to be involved. SHIS, there's a SHH, the Hard of Hearing organization, they're involved. The parents need to be involved. Lots of people from the community need to be involved. And that's where we can make sure that deaf and hard of hearing services are not behind. We need to roll up our sleeves, and we've been working for 30 years. There's a lot of good things happening. For example, my father said to me, my doctor's appointment was postponed. And I said, why? Said the doctor said, no, I couldn't go to my appointment because there was no interpreter. The doctor said, sorry, I can't go ahead with your appointment. My father said, I don't care. I'll write back and forth. But he said, no, it's the law. He has to provide an interpreter to me. And so he needed me to reschedule with an interpreter. So, my father went back. He had an interpreter, and it was amazing. So that means that we have empowered deaf people and providers to know they need to provide interpreting services. And that's one good positive thing that's come out of the commission so far. You know, that's 30 years of hard work, bringing better lives to the deaf and hard of hearing people of Rhode Island. And so that was one reason why I felt I needed to be involved and advocate to make sure our rights are protected and the services we need are provided and there is equal access. And that is my passion. That was my vision at that time, because we needed the long-term goals to make life better. Wow. The next question is, what is your most memorable RICDHH memory? I can remember, you know, if you imagine Rhode Island Commission on Deaf and Hard of Hearing like a cloud, and you're trying to like, where are you? There's thunder and lightning. And like, where is the office? We didn't have an office. We didn't know where interpreting services were. Everything, where do we go to get advocating services? People didn't know. There was VR, and there was the deaf school. But when that bill set up the Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing in 1992, it was as if the clouds parted and the sun came out. there's still thunder, there's still rumbling, there's still problems, because the hearing people would look at it and not be happy, and the hard of hearing people would be in one position, the deaf people would be in another. Trying to make things work was difficult because of the three different groups. So we came up with something called tri-vision philosophy. It's a theory that means the three communities, the hearing, the hard of hearing, and the deaf, it's important that all three of them become one community. In the past, they'd all been on their own, doing their own thing, but it takes all three groups to make it work in the community. So it meant we need to have ground rules and an agenda where hard of hearing individuals could bring up their issues and needs and what they focused on. And the other groups, the deaf and hearing, need to listen to them. Then the deaf people could explain what they needed, and the hearing and the hard of hearing needed to pay attention. They couldn't just put them down. They needed to pay attention and listen to the needs. They're like, we need an interpreter referral service. And so we would set things up for them. And then the hearing community would say, oh, we don't know anything about the deaf and the hard of hearing, and so we want to understand each other better. So the agenda would share time with all of them and be respectful and have proper attitudes and value the community needs and the goals to make all of us better people and to make the lives of everyone. And so that tri-vision, that really helped us to meet a lot of our goals. The list is still long. There's a lot of goals, but it takes money for those things. And maybe if we had more money, we could make things better. But with tri-vision, that really helped to get us rooted and help people that know they needed to respect each other and work together as a community. And I remember we celebrated that when we set up the referral service at the commission. We did a celebration. And what we did was there was one hard of hearing person who had a beautiful home in Jamestown. And they hosted a cookout. And all of us came together to celebrate. And you would see the deaf people talking, and then the hard of hearing people would be a little bit slower, and the hearing people wouldn't quite be understanding. And then an interpreter would come in, and the communication would be solid. And that tri-vision, that thought process, really made it successful. And the thunder and the rumbling lessened and the sun came out. But of course, it's not all good. It's not all sunshine. The job is not done. There is occasional thunder and lightning, but we need to keep the community strong. And so looking back 30 years later, tri-vision is still there. It's still there. It's needed. Whether it's used or not, I don't know, but it needs to be used. Tri-vision includes social justice, diversity, community, language, rights, individuals, needs. Social justice includes all of that and makes us stronger and makes our community lives better. That's the goal. That's what really inspired me in the moment to get involved. And that applies to things that are happening today. And so really, I'm impressed with Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf today. During COVID-19, the commission did a great job of providing communication access, providing services, on TV for the news press conferences, having an interpreter there, a CDI. I got chills. I thought back to 30 years ago, we had nothing like that. Nothing. And now we have all these different things. And so I really want to applaud your hard work. It's not me. It takes all of us and all of you to be involved, the commissioners, the members, the chairperson, everybody together to make this happen. And that's really special. The Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, keep on going. Wow, thank you so much. So the last question is, what is it that you want to see in Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing's future? What I was just telling you before in the past, but what do I want to see in the future? I want us to revisit the requirements and the list. I think there's 7 or 8. For example, mental health services. It is so important. We need to focus in Rhode Island on mental health services and make sure that they're expanded. My parents have gotten older, and there's no community center, there's no advocacy center, no nursing home services for the deaf here in Rhode Island. We don't have them. Means that my parents have to move to Ohio or Massachusetts or Rochester, New York. Why? Because they have services that we don't have here. So one thing that we really need to keep advocating and work on is getting to that point where we can provide more services for deaf people related to mental health, counseling, psychology, therapists, and expanding the interpreter pool here in Rhode Island. We need more interpreters. We need to do some recruitment of interpreting services and expand that as well. And social justice. There are some privileged people who are ignoring what's needed. They're not checking what's needed. They don't know. And we need to outreach to the community, because they can't just dismiss us from being involved and giving our input. We need to make sure that the services are there. We are in the state of Rhode Island, and our community cannot be put down. We need to be included. We need to provide social justice workshops and training. And some people who have no idea about social justice, you know, they go to work or they stay home all the time, or they just don't socialize. Well, other people who are involved, they know all about it, and they say, well, you're not doing anything. You're just sitting there. You're part of the problem. But we need to think, do we have workshops and training to help those who don't know understand that they can get involved and make a better life for all, instead of just dismissing them? You know, they need access to information. We need to check why they don't have the information, provide that information, and bring them together with the community as allies so that life is better for all. That's really my vision. You know, if we go back to the principles of 30 years ago, the tri-vision, we have to make a collaboration between all of us, hearing, deaf, hard of hearing. We need to see it from each other's view. It's not just separate. We need to all come together and make changes. It takes the entire community to make people's lives better. And that's why RICDHH is there. And the Rhode Island community can just sit back and say, oh, everything's good. Everything's good. I don't need to get involved. But we do need you. For example, right now, captions are great, right? You know, you get an interpreter on the TV in the box, you got your text phone, you got relay service. That's really cool. You know, you're feeling like everything's great. But please do not think that everything's great. Because one day, if you're sitting there quietly, Somebody else may decide to take away one of your services, maybe VRS services, referral service, just taken. And then you're going to be like, hey, but it's too late. We don't want to go back 30 years ago and do it all over again. Legislation and convincing people and going to court and lawsuits and all of that, and have our lives get worse. We all need to keep checking, communicating with people who don't know what's going on to help them know they can advocate for the services that are there. It's our responsibility to check them. We need all of you. It doesn't matter where you are. You need to check on other people and check on the commission so that the community comes together to make sure that the lives are good for all. Thank you for sharing all of those points, Bruce. Really appreciate it. So my last question for you, could you explain one fun fact about yourself? I love people watching. Love people watching. I'm like, why did that person do that? Why did they do it that way? Why didn't they want to come together and collaborate? And so I love to come up with strategies that I can put in place to make people come together. And I do that through humor, through acting, and ASL stories. Because ASL stories, there are so many of them. You know, if you could bring those stories to the hearing world, it touches them. They are touched at the same time they're laughing, and you're giving them some of the shared responsibility. So if there's a hearing person, they say, why is there no fire alarm in that room? And they say, well, you'll tell a story about what happened to the family that didn't have a fire alarm in their room. They almost died. You know, luckily they escaped. And so you tell this story to a hearing person, or another story, for example, you go to an event and a hearing person approaches a deaf person, and the hearing person just starts talking and moving their lips, and the deaf person's just staring at them, nodding, and you shake hands and you're like, oh yeah, sure. Okay, awesome, great, all right. You're thinking, what did we just agree to? And then tomorrow that same person shows up at my house going, hi. And I'm like, what are you doing? I told them I'm misunderstood. I wasn't willing to get an interpreter. And so, because it costs money to get an interpreter. And so I had sealed the deal by shaking hands. And so that's why I need to have an interpreter. So you have ASL stories for different things. There are so many stories. And so that's my thing, is I just love to watch people and understand what's going on, and then try to make a solution and empower people through ASL stories to solve problems and reconnect. Smiling face going forward. Wow, that's really fascinating story, Bruce. That applies to so many things. Interesting. Really, I just want to thank you, Bruce, for being part of this interview. We have really enjoyed hearing your experiences, your history of what happened as a chairperson. So I want everyone to watch out for the next Chairperson Spotlight series that will be coming soon. And I hope that all of you enjoyed watching this interview. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Go Rhode Island.